Black. Not the black of a cinema before the projector warms. Not the black behind your eyelids. The black of a room that has never, in 300 years, seen a window. A single sound, the turning of a page. Not paper. Something else. Something that breathes softly when handled, that yields slightly under the pressure of a fingertip the way skin yields, because that is precisely what it is. A finger, impossibly pale, running along a column of names. Each name is written in a different ink. Some inks are red. Some are brown. Some are the faded yellow of old bile. The names are small, crowded together, written in scripts from a dozen centuries. Latin, Arabic, Old French, Cyrillic, Swahili, English, Tagalog. They crowd each other like passengers on a sinking vessel, desperate for space, desperate to be read. The finger stops, pulls back. We see now the hand, the wrist, the arm. A figure seated at a desk carved from a single piece of bone. Animal, we hope, bent over a book the size of a dining table. The book is open to a page somewhere in its middle. Its cover, glimpsed at the edges, is the gray-brown of cured hide, stretched taut over boards of some dark wood, stitched together with what appears to be, yes, a row of teeth. Human molars, worn smooth from centuries of contact with other hands. The figure reaches forward again and traces a name. His lips move. There is a philosophy among my kind, whispered mostly because to speak it aloud implies a vulnerability that vampires consider obscene, that every life we do not take becomes a kind of debt. That restraint is not mercy. It is merely deferred appetite. He closes his eyes. I have never believed this, but I have also never been entirely sure I was right. His eyes open. They are the color of old amber, slightly clouded, the way amber gets when it has been handled too much and for too long. His name is Mordecai Voss. He is, and this is a conservative estimate, somewhere between 400 and 500 years old. He looks 42. He has looked 42 for longer than most countries have existed. He is the only vampire in the world who owns a copy of the Liber Inmorsi, the Book of Unbitten Throats. He is also, as of 3 days ago, the only vampire in the world who has begun to suspect he should not have told anyone that. The room is vast and improbable. It occupies the sub-basement of a building in Prague that, above ground, presents itself as a mediocre tourist hotel. Below ground it has been something else for 3 centuries. The ceiling is 30 feet high and lined with iron candelabras holding candles that have never once been lit from a match. They are lit, when they need to be, from the tips of Mordecai's fingers, a small and private magic he has never explained to anyone. The walls are books. Floor to ceiling, every surface, even sections of the floor itself covered in glass panels beneath which volumes are stored horizontally. There are approximately 60,000 books here. Mordecai has read all of them, some of them twice, some of them until the spines cracked and the pages came loose, and he had to commission hand-stitched replacements from a bookbinder in Geneva who has been in Mordecai's employ for 11 years and who has been told very clearly not to ask questions. But there is only one Liber Inmorsi, and it does not belong here. Mordecai stands and begins to pace. A habit from his human life that has never left him, the way certain gestures from childhood cling to us regardless of how much we change. He paces 7 steps to the right, turns, paces 7 steps to the left. This is the exact width of the room where he was born. He has no conscious knowledge of this. He speaks to the room, which is also a way of speaking to himself. The book was not supposed to arrive until the equinox. The courier was earlier. He stops, or replaced. He crosses to a heavy iron door set into the far wall, opens it, and reveals a staircase going up. He does not go up. He listens. Prague 2:14 in the morning. Rain on cobblestones. Cat somewhere irritated. Distant traffic. And there, at the edge of what a human ear could catch, footsteps. Slow, deliberate, and slightly too light to belong to any living body carrying its own weight. Mordecai closes the door. He turns back to the book. The book, if we look carefully, seems to be looking back. Mordecai sits again. He does what he has been unable to stop himself from doing for the 3 days the book has been in his possession. He opens it again, finds his chapter. His own chapter, the one titled in the book's peculiar index, under V. for Voss Mordecai, preceded by the dates of his mortal birth and immortal rebirth. The chapter is long. He has had 467 years as a vampire. During those years he has encountered, in close enough proximity to feed, in circumstances desperate or opportune enough that no one would have noticed, approximately 11,000 human beings whom he chose not to bite. 11,000. Most vampires his age have fed on thousands. Some have fed on tens of thousands. The Voss number is, and he has always known this, in the vague way that one knows things about oneself that one has never wanted to examine directly. Unusual. But what the book tells him, what he is only now beginning to understand, is not merely the number. It is the consequences. The book does not simply list names. That would be manageable. A list of names is a list of names. An inventory of good intentions. A rosary of near misses. What the book does, what makes it the most dangerous object created in the last millennium, is that beside each name, it records what that person became. What they did. What they built or broke or birthed or prevented. The causal chain stretching forward from the moment they were spared. He runs his finger down the first page of his chapter. The first name in my chapter is a woman. Margit. I don't remember her. I was young by our standards. Barely 40 years turned, half mad with hunger, in a village outside Olomouc in the winter of 1563. She was carrying water from a well. She had red hair and she smelled of smoke and yeast from the bakery where she worked. I remember stopping. I remember the want. I remember, and this is the part that has always defined me and embarrassed me in equal measure. I remember the thought, she is afraid. Not of me specifically. Of the dark, of the cold, of the walk home. She was afraid the way all people are afraid in 1563, which is to say, constantly and about everything, because 1563 was a very frightening year to be alive. Pauses. Looks at the name. Traces it. I let her pass. I told myself it was tactics. That the village was too small and she would be missed. But I knew, I have always known, that it was something else. Something I have no clean word for. Something that has kept me more nights than I can count, standing in the cold deciding not to be what I am. He turns to the column beside her name. The column of consequences. Margit. Married. For children. Her eldest son became a herbalist. His daughter became a midwife. Her daughter's daughter delivered in 1641, a child who grew up to be a priest who converted an entire valley from a death cult that had taken hold during a plague year. A cult that, without his intervention, the book suggests, would have spread and consumed 3 more valleys and killed. The book is very specific about this. 412 people. Silence. 412 lives. Because I did not bite a girl carrying water to her house in 1563. Because she smelled of fear and I found, somewhere in the ruins of my conscience, a reason to keep walking. He closes the chapter. Opens it again immediately. He cannot stop. 11,000 names. 11,000 columns of consequence. I have been reading for 3 days and I am not yet through the 16th century. And I am beginning to understand, in a way that is not comfortable, in a way that feels less like enlightenment and more like a sentence being handed down, that the world I have been walking through for 4 centuries and a half is partly made of my own restraint. That every war that did not start, every plague that was contained, every child that was born, every treaty that held. Some percentage of all of this is downstream of a night when I walked past someone in the dark and kept my teeth to myself. He leans back. This would be a beautiful thing to know, if no one else knew the book existed. He looks at the ceiling. 3 days ago I made a mistake. I don't know what I was. Lonely perhaps, which is also embarrassing. I mentioned it. To the wrong person. In the wrong company. I said the words Liber Inmorsi to a vampire named Sylvester Kane, who I have known for 2 centuries, who I have trusted in the conditional way that our kind trusts anyone, and whose expression when I said those words was, briefly, just for a moment, the expression of a woman calculating the fastest way to empty a room. 3 days earlier. A wine bar in Malastrana. Low ceilings. Stone walls. The kind of place that has been a wine bar since the 15th century and quietly plans to keep being one. A handful of late patrons, none of them vampires. Two of the figures at the corner table most certainly are. She appears to be, somewhere in her late 30s. She has the kind of face that reads as aristocratic without being able to name specifically why. High cheekbones. A manner of holding her wine glass untouched that suggests she is occupying it as a prop rather than a pleasure. Sylvestra is 400 years old. She has been, for the last century, the nominal leader of a council of elder vampires called the Pale Accord, a body that governs loosely and contentiously the political relationships between vampire factions across Europe. She is, by reputation, measured, rational, disinclined to drama. Her expression when Mordecai says Liber Inmorsi is the first crack in that reputation he has ever seen. Say that again, he said. I heard what you said. Was. She sets down the wine glass with a precision that suggests enormous care being applied to a simple gesture. Mordecai. The Liber Inmorsi has not been verified as real in 3 centuries. Most of us assumed it was mythological. A story told to make the young ones feel guilty. It arrived last week. From the Ghent collection after the estate liquidation. Hidden inside a false-backed encyclopedia from 1887. The binding is unmistakable. The inks, I tested them. Human origin, all of them across the correct centuries. You have it. Have it. She looks at him for a long moment. And you're reading your own chapter. Wouldn't you? I would burn the book and tell no one it had arrived. She picks up her wine glass again. How far have you gotten? 1600s. My restraint in the 1600s was apparently responsible for. There was a mathematician in Delft. Oh, I don't want to know. She looks away. A muscle in her jaw moves. You shouldn't have told me this. You're the head of the Pale Accord. If the book exists, you needed to. I needed to not know. There is a difference. She stands. Straightens her coat with the careful movements of someone reconstructing a performance. Keep it locked. Keep it hidden. Don't read any more of it. She leans in. And do not, under any circumstances, tell anyone in the accord. She walks out. Mordecai watches her go. That is exactly what someone would say before telling everyone in the accord. Back to present. The footsteps from before have multiplied. Mordecai stands at the center of his library, the book on the desk behind him, and counts them. No, 7. Moving around the perimeter of the building above, not entering. Circling. He knows this pattern. It's called the shepherd's walk. It is a very old vampire tactic for clearing a location of witnesses before entry. It has not been used, to his knowledge, since the Vienna incident of 1903. His phone buzzes. He looks at it. A message from an unknown number. 4 words. Give us the book. He puts the phone in his pocket. Well, that was fast. He begins with the calm efficiency of someone who has survived 4 centuries by being prepared to hide the book. Not in the false-back shelf, too obvious. Not in the floor vault, the first place anyone looks. He carries it, with extraordinary care, to a section of the library that appears to be a solid wall of identical-looking encyclopedias from the 1950s. He removes 7 of them, revealing a hollow behind them. Inside the hollow is a box he built himself, from a material that blocks both scent and the subtle magnetic signature that very old objects carry. He places the Liber Inmorsi inside, replaces the encyclopedias, and returns to the center of the room. Then he sits down, crosses his legs, and waits. He does not have to wait long. The iron door at the top of the stairs opens with the practiced quiet of someone who has picked many locks. 3 figures descend the stairs. They are dressed, all of them, with the studied plainness of people who want to be difficult to describe later. Neutral colors, no distinctive features, faces that would be called forgettable if they had the softness of mortal faces. They don't. They have the sharp stillness of very old predators attempting to pass as furniture. The first one through the door is Rook, who has been called many things in 4 centuries and has settled, for the current era, on a name as sparse as his temperament. Appears to be about 30. He is actually closer to 350. He moves with the particular economy of someone who has never once wasted emotion in his entire immortal life. The second is Asha Vane, who is newer, perhaps a century old, and who carries herself with the aggressive confidence of someone still surprised, on some level, that she has survived this long. She has the kind of beauty that looks like a weapon because it is. She uses it the way a human might use a knife. Functionally without sentiment. The third is Olin Mire, who is the oldest of the three and who looks, incongruously, like a retired schoolteacher. He wears glasses he does not need. He has a kind face that has been worn smooth by centuries into something that reads as gentle until you notice his eyes, which are the eyes of someone who has been calculating exits since before most countries had borders. They stop at the base of the stairs. Look at Mordecai. Look at the room. Mordecai Voss. Book. Usha. Olin. He knows them. He has known them in the loose way vampires know each other for decades. They have been, until this moment, associated with a faction he had always considered philosophical rather than dangerous, a group called the Mending, who believe that the chaos of modern civilization is partly the fault of vampire restraint over the centuries. That by not feeding, by not shaping history through their predation, they have allowed the human world to metastasize beyond control. He has always found this argument intellectually lazy. He has also always found the people who make it slightly more intense than their arguments seem to warrant. He is revising this assessment in real time. You know why we're here. I know why you think you're here. I'm curious whether it matches the actual reason. The book. There's no book here. You have 60,000 books here. 63,412. None of them is what you're looking for. Mordecai, we have been patient. The Mending has been patient. We have watched for the last century as the Pale Accord has cultivated its policy of strategic withdrawal, its policy of, I believe the current phrasing is harmonic coexistence, and we have seen the consequences. The warming world, the wars, the fracturing of institutions that we, had we been permitted to guide them appropriately, might have what? Bled into compliance. Fed on enough politicians and architects and scientists that the world would run more to your liking. Nudge. As we were meant to. By whom? By the fact of what we are. Predators do not exist to stand in the shadows and count their restraint. They exist to act. And the book is a ledger. A record of every correction that should have been made and wasn't. Every name in that book is a life that should have been redirected. Ended. If you prefer plain speech. Silence. There are 11,000 names in my chapter alone. And how many chapters in the book? A longer silence. I don't know. I haven't counted. We estimate 400. The oldest of us, the most restrained, have the longest chapters. Olin's chapter alone has. Usha. But she continues. We estimate 40,000 names. All of them alive. All of them, or their descendants, still walking around in a world that they are shaping by the simple fact of their continued existence. And you want to tell us that this is good. That this is as it should be. I want to tell you that those people, those 40,000 people and their descendants, are not mistakes. They are not omissions. They are a world. They are a world that is burning. Every world burns. That is not a vampire problem. That is a world problem. Where is the book, Mordecai? We know it was delivered 3 days ago. We know you've been reading it. We can smell it on you. Old ink, old skin, the particular musk of a binding that has been handled by. It was delivered. I read the first several pages. I found it disturbing in ways I hadn't anticipated, and I made arrangements for it to leave the city. It left this morning. Where? If I told you that, the arrangement would rather defeat its purpose, wouldn't it? They look at each other. A long, complicated glance that carries, the way long-lived beings' glances often do, an entire conversation compressed into a fraction of a second. We'll find it. No. And when we do, Mordecai, understand that what we are trying to do is not destruction. It is restoration. The names in that book are not innocent. They are debts. 4 centuries of debts. and debts accrue interest. He turns to go. Asha and Olin follow. At the base of the stairs, Olin pauses. I've always respected you. Your discipline. Or consistency. But discipline without purpose is just self-punishment. You know this. He follows the others up the stairs. Mordecai stands in the silence of his library for a long time. Then he walks to the encyclopedias, removes the box, looks at the book inside it. All right, now we have a problem. He calls someone. The phone rings 4 times. A voice answers, young, female, accented with the particular flattened vowels of someone raised in multiple countries simultaneously. It's 2:30 in the morning, Mordecai. No. Need you. But where? Petra with a cute BO arrives 40 minutes later. She is 29 years old. She is a historian specializing in what she calls the archival methodology of suppressed documents, which is a very sophisticated way of saying that she finds hidden things and figures out what they meant and who hid them and why. She has worked for Mordecai for 3 years. She knows, with the certainty of someone who has arrived at a conclusion through evidence rather than revelation, that Mordecai is not human. She has never said this out loud. Neither has he. It is one of those mutual understandings that functions perfectly well as long as neither party examines it directly. She has dark hair cut practically short, the look of someone who would find the word charming slightly insulting, and a bag that always contains, among other things, a camera, 3 notebooks, 2 pens, a hip flask of very good Slovakian brandy, and, since starting to work for Mordecai, a small crucifix, which she carries not from religious conviction but from what she describes as applied skepticism. She comes down the stairs, takes one look at Mordecai's expression and says, "How bad?" Sit down. Is it? He tells her. Not everything, not the catalogue of his own chapter, not the specific names and their cascading consequences, but the structure of the book, what it is, what the mending wants it for. She listens with the professional stillness of someone who has been trained to receive information without immediately reacting to it. When he finishes, they want to find and kill every living descendant of every person you, and vampires like you, chose not to feed on. Not every descendant. The book is more specific than that. It identifies the individuals in each causal chain who are most responsible for the world-shaping effects of the original mercy. The critical nodes. Remove those, and the chain collapses, like cutting load-bearing walls. Exactly like that. And there are, how many vampires in the mending? 300 that I know of. Possibly more. They've been quiet for decades. I thought they were philosophical. Discussion group. People who needed somewhere to put their bitterness. But they were building to this. They were waiting for the book. Once you have the names, the specific names, not theories, not guesses, but verified causal chains, you have a list. And a list is Hunt. She opens her notebook. She is already taking notes, which is one of the things he has always admired about her. Why come to me? You have connections. The Pale Accord. Sylvestra Kane knew I had the book. She is the one who told the mending. You're sure? I have 300 years of practice reading people. Yes, I'm sure. So the governing body of European vampires is compromised. Not entirely, but enough that I can't trust the parts one can't verify, which is, at this moment, all of them. But, so the plan is what, exactly? I need to move the book. Somewhere they can't find it. But first, and this is the part that I need your help with, I need to understand it. Properly. The full scope. There's something about the structure of the book I can't figure out alone. He brings it out. Sets it on the desk. Petra stares at it for a long moment. Then, with the reverence and efficiency of a professional, she puts on the thin cotton gloves she keeps in her bag for archival work and leans in. Oh, that's real. That is, yes. The binding technique is, this is from the late medieval period, the stitching pattern, but the materials are. She stops herself. It's indexed. By vampire. Alphabetical by name. Chronological within each chapter. And the format of the consequences column. That's what I can't parse. It's not straight narration. It's more like branches. A decision tree, but rendered as prose. Each consequence branches into subsidiary consequences. And each of those branches further. But there are symbols in the margins that I think indicate convergences, places where multiple causal chains from different chapters meet. You mean one person can appear in multiple vampires' chapters? Exactly. One spared life might be downstream of multiple acts of restraint, compounded mercy. And those convergence points, I think those are the most significant individuals. The ones the mending would most want to find, because they're the most weight-bearing. She turns pages carefully. Mordecai watches her. There is something he finds, not comforting exactly but steadying, about watching a human engage seriously with a problem. The mortality in it. The urgency. How many convergence points are there? I don't know. I've only found 3 in the section I've read. But I've only read through the 1600s. The modern sections would have more. More vampires, more choices, more intersecting consequences. It sits back. What are the names? The convergence points you've found so far. A herbalist's lineage in 17th century Bohemia. A shipping merchant in 18th century Marseilles, whose descendants apparently went on to. The book is specific but also somewhat baroque in its causality. Prevent 3 separate cholera outbreaks through what appears to be a combination of trade route management and municipal advocacy. And a woman alive today in Lisbon whose name is. He stops. Whose name is what? Whose name I am not going to say out loud yet. Because if I'm right about what she represents, and the book suggests she is the largest convergence point in the modern section. How large? 64 separate causal chains. From 64 different acts of vampire restraint, across 12 centuries, converging in one living human woman. Silence. That's an impossible number. Yet, what does she do? This woman. She's a pediatric epidemiologist. She works for the WHO. She is currently 3 months away from publishing a paper that will, according to the book's projections, which have been accurate in every historical case I've been able to verify, substantially reshape the global response framework for novel respiratory pathogens. You're telling me there is one woman alive today who is the convergence point of 12 centuries of vampire mercy, and she is 3 months away from potentially saving millions of lives, and the mending doesn't know yet who she is. They will know. When they get the book. Her name will be. There will be nothing like it in all 400 chapters. They will see immediately what she is. He looks at the book. She has to be protected. Before they find her. Before they even know to look. How do you protect someone from 300 vampires? I'm going to need help. Specific help. From the one part of the old world that the Pale Accord doesn't control. Which is the unturned. The unturned are humans who know. Not by accident, not by trauma, not by the kind of knowing that requires therapy and a career change. They know the way a botanist knows plants. Professionally, thoroughly, with a particular calm that comes from having organized dangerous knowledge into a workable system. They have existed in various forms for as long as vampires have. They are not hunters. They are, in their own self-description, monitors. They watch. They track. They intervene when necessary. Not to destroy, but to contain, to redirect, to negotiate. They are very good at all 3 of these things. They are also, by Mordecai's count, the only group in the world who would help him purely because the cause was worth it, rather than because they wanted something from him in return. Their current contact in this region is a man named Benedict Hale, 61 years old, former intelligence officer for a country he won't name, gray-bearded, methodical, possessed of the particular stillness of someone who has sat in rooms with very dangerous people and survived by being more patient than they were. They meet at a farmhouse. Mordecai and Petra arrive first. Benedict arrives 5 minutes later on foot, from a direction that does not correspond to any road. He looks at Mordecai. Looks at the bag Mordecai is carrying, the bag that contains the book inside its shielded box. The Liber Inmorsi. I heard the rumor this morning. How? We have ears in the mending. We have had ears in the mending for 30 years. They've been assembling for the last 24 hours. I was going to contact you. How many of them? Of the 300 I'd estimated, we're now tracking approximately 240 actively mobile, moving in coordinated cells, 4 to 7 individuals each. Prague. Vienna, Amsterdam, Lisbon. Pauses. Lisbon specifically. A cell of 7, which is unusually large for them. They're looking for something or someone in Lisbon. Mordecai and Petra exchange a look. They don't have the book yet. They can't know who she is. Ooh. The primary target. The convergence point. How would they know? They've had scholars. People who've studied the historical patterns. Indirect modeling. Looking at existing history. Identifying which living individuals represent the most significant concentrations of long-term consequences. Working backward from there. They don't need the book to generate a probabilistic target list. The book just confirms and specifies. Silence. Her name is Dr. Amaro Say. She's been on our watch list for 3 years as a potential high-value target. We just didn't know why until now. She needs to be moved. She needs to be protected. Moving her at this point would simply tell the mending exactly where to redirect their attention. Then protected. Here, there, wherever she is. We have people in Lisbon. We can have a team on her by morning. He looks at the bag. And the book. The book needs to go somewhere that isn't findable by anyone. I thought. Not with us. We don't want it either. The temptation for any group to use that knowledge is, regardless of intentions, it is a corrupting document. You must know this by now, having read it. He looks at Mordecai with a directness that is not unkind. You've been reading your own chapter. How does it feel? Like being told that every time you thought you were being weak, you were actually building something. Something large. Something you can't quite see the shape of because you're too close to it. That is, Mordecai, the definition of a life. Silence. In the farmhouse. The wind against old windows. Somewhere outside, a horse in a field, moving its weight from foot to foot. The book cannot stay in Europe. If you're asking my advice, and I believe you are, it needs to go somewhere that requires passage through multiple jurisdictions and multiple forms of cooperation that the mending cannot easily purchase. I have a contact in Reykjavik. Iceland is not far enough. Who can arrange onward passage to a facility in the Faroe Islands? A monastery, technically, though its current function is more archival than religious. Cold, isolated, staffed by people who are neither vampire nor affiliated with any faction, and who have been safely managing sensitive materials for 60 years. And in the meantime, you and I and he looks at Petra. Your colleague need to buy time, which means we need to give the mending something to chase. False book. Convincingly aged. Containing enough accurate information to seem real, enough misdirection to send them in circles for long enough that we can get the real one out and Dr. Osei protected. I know a forger in Antwerp. He worked for the Ghent collection before it was liquidated. He's made things for Mordecai before. He's good. But he's never had to fool 300 vampires. He's very good. And I'll sit with him. Tell him exactly what they'll be looking for. She looks at Mordecai. I'll need to know the real contents, the structure, the symbols. Enough to make something that reads real. I'll tell you everything I've read. And I'll need to go to Lisbon first. Both men look at her. To see her. Dr. Osei, I need to understand who she is. What she does. Not from the book, from life. If I'm going to protect her, I need to know what I'm protecting. Not a convergence point. Person. Benedict nods slowly. You have 24 hours before the mending consolidates its position in Lisbon. I would not suggest arriving later than that. Petra closes her notebook. Puts it in her bag. And I'll need the brandy. She takes the hip flask, takes a sip, and passes it to Mordecai. He looks at it for a moment, the human ritual of this, the warmth of it, the ordinary courage of it, and he takes a sip too. It does nothing for him physiologically. It is, nonetheless, exactly the right gesture. The city in daylight is, as always, the most beautiful lie. White buildings, blue tiles, the smell of salt and bread and diesel in equal measure. A city built on 7 hills, which means that every direction is either up or down, that exhaustion and exhilaration are the same walk. Petra arrives at noon, with the sun loud on the water of the Tagus, and makes her way to the neighborhood of Alvalade. Dr. Amara Ose lives in a third-floor apartment above a pharmacy and below a family with 3 children and a remarkable tolerance for noise. She is 38 years old. She has the unhurried intensity of someone whose day is already organized before it begins, whose coffee cup is in her hand before she is fully awake, whose mind is always slightly ahead of wherever her body currently is. Petra does not introduce herself immediately. She sits in the cafe across the street for 2 hours and watches. She watches Amara Ose come downstairs at 12:15 with a bag of recycling and a look on her face of someone conducting a minor internal argument. She watches her stop at the pharmacy window, not to buy anything, but to check the sign, a printed notice about flu vaccinations, and make a small approving noise and continue on. She watches her return 20 minutes later with groceries and a newspaper she will fold, Petra suspects, to the science section first. She watches a woman living a Tuesday. I have spent 3 years working for a vampire who has kept 11,000 people alive across 4 centuries. In those 3 years I have seen remarkable things. Things that shifted the edges of my world and required me to rebuild the map afterward. But nothing in those 3 years prepared me for the specific quality of sitting across the street from someone who, according to a book made of human skin, is the living accumulation of 12 centuries of mercy. Because she doesn't look like an accumulation. She looks like a person. She looks like someone who is slightly annoyed at the weight of the groceries and slightly pleased about the newspaper and entirely, completely, unaware that on the other side of the continent, a very old obsessive is in a farmhouse outside Bratislava ensuring that she gets to stay that way. Petra goes inside, sits down at the same cafe again, orders another coffee, and becomes aware, slowly, of the feeling of being watched. She doesn't look up. She stirs her coffee, runs through the list of responses Benedict had drilled into her during the 40-minute briefing on the train. Don't look, don't react, identify exits. She has identified 3 exits. She notes the weight of the small silver alloy tool in her jacket pocket. Not a weapon exactly, but a deterrent. Vampires find silver alloy proximity deeply unpleasant, the way humans find certain frequencies of sound unpleasant, disorienting rather than deadly. She keeps stirring her coffee. A voice from behind her. He's good. Petra turns. Slowly. Asha Vane is sitting 2 tables behind her, facing the same window, a glass of water untouched in front of her. She is smiling the particular smile of someone who has gotten better at something than they expected to be. The silver deterrent in the left pocket. The exit assessment. The deliberate lack of reaction. Benedict trained you. I don't know anyone named Benedict. Course you don't. She turns to look at Petra directly. I'm not here for her. I want to be clear about that. What are you here for? Information. Specifically. Does Mordecai understand what the convergence symbols actually mean? Oz. I don't know what you're talking about. The margin notations. In the modern section, Mordecai has been reading his own chapter and probably hasn't gotten to the notations in the margin of the convergence pages. They're in a hand different from the rest of the book. Older. The book's own scribe, or whatever made it, we don't have a good theory, added them later. They don't just indicate convergence. They indicate something else. What do you mean? The book is not just a record. It's not just a ledger of consequences. The convergence symbols. I've seen photographs, fragments, from a partial copy that surfaced in the 1940s and was destroyed. The convergence symbols indicate something the mending doesn't know. Something that I don't think Rook knows either, though I'm not sure Olin doesn't. He stops. The book records what was spared. But the convergence points, the people like Dr. Ose, they're not just the beneficiaries of accumulated mercy. They are the living record of it. The book keeps itself. Through them. Petra stares at her. What does that mean? It means if you destroy the people, if the mending does what it wants to do, you don't just remove the consequences. You erase the record. The book becomes not blank but unreadable, because the living proof of its accuracy is gone. She picks up her water glass, sets it down with precise care. It means the mending isn't just trying to correct history. They're trying to make it so that the mercy never happened. Not just undone, unremembered. She looks out the window at Amara Osei's building. Tell Mordecai that I said that the book has a self-preservation mechanism. He'll understand. She walks to the door. Oh, and tell him I got out. I left the mending 6 months ago. I've been watching them since. I'm not his enemy. She goes. Petra sits very still for a moment, then takes out her phone. Asha Vane just sat down with me. You're going to want to hear this. The forger's name is Jules Beckers. He is 63 and has the stained hands and the particular kind of patience that comes from a life spent making things look old. He is, as Petra described, very good. He is also, as he makes clear within the first 5 minutes of the meeting, aware that the thing he is being asked to copy is not a normal document. I have copied Gutenberg pages, illuminated manuscripts, a first edition Shakespeare that passed 3 independent tests. I once copied a 3rd century Roman legal document that fooled the museum that owned the original for 8 years. He looks at the photographs Petra has spread on the table. Close-ups of the binding, the page structure, the ink variations. The material of the pages is not paper, not vellum. I have worked with both. This is something else. Can you replicate it? With the right preparation, I can approximate it well enough that someone who is not looking for a fake will not look for a fake. But someone who knows, they'll have less than an hour with it. Probably less. It just needs to be convincing enough to send them in the wrong direction. He looks at the photographs again. The symbols in the margins. These are not in any symbolic system I recognize. And I have spent 40 years studying pre-modern symbolic systems. Can you copy them without understanding them? I can copy anything. Whether the copy carries whatever weight the original has is a different question. He looks at her. Where is the original now? Somewhere safe. And where it is going? Somewhere safer. He nods, picks up a pen, begins to work. Mordecai has not slept, which is not unusual for him. He sleeps perhaps twice a week, briefly, more from habit than necessity, but he has also not read the book since Petra left, which is unusual. He is sitting at the farmhouse table with his phone in his hands, rereading Petra's message. The book has a self-preservation mechanism. He thinks about this for a very long time. Then he takes out the book and opens it. Not to his own chapter. To the very beginning, to the introduction. Written in a hand older than the oldest name in the first chapter. In a Latin so archaic it reads half as Greek and half as something without a modern descendant, which he has read 3 times and which he has not, until this moment, fully understood. He reads it again. The introduction to the Liber Inmorsi, which most scholars who've studied fragments have dismissed as philosophical preamble, is actually a technical document. It describes, in terms I had previously considered metaphorical, the mechanism by which the book maintains its own relevance. The lives recorded in it, the spared lives, the chains of consequence, are described not as subjects of the book but as extensions of it. Organs. The book breathes through them. Its pages hold their information not in ink alone but in the continued existence of the people whose fates those pages record. Remove the people and the information, not the words but the meaning of the words, dissolves. You could still read the names, but you would not be able to understand what they meant. The causal chains would look like unconnected events. The convergence symbols would be decoration. The book would become, functionally, a list of unrelated strangers. He closes the introduction. This is what the mending doesn't know. Rook and Olin have been planning this action as a correction, a surgical removal of consequences, after which the world resets to what it would have been without vampire mercy. A return to what they consider natural order. What they don't understand, what I don't think they could understand because it requires a kind of thinking that their philosophy has made impossible for them, is that you cannot remove what has grown from mercy and return to a world before the mercy. Mercy leaves a residue. It is not reversible. It is only destroyable. And destroying it destroys the record. And destroying the record doesn't eliminate the mercy, it just makes it unmeasurable. Makes it feel, to anyone looking at the resulting chaos, like it never happened. He stands up. That is what they want. Not a world corrected. A world in which the correcting was never needed. In which vampire restraint, across 12 centuries, was simply absent. Never a choice. Never a moment of conscience in the dark. Never a girl with red hair carrying water home and arriving safely. He makes a decision. He calls Benedict. The book needs to move now. Not tomorrow. And I need Asha Vane. I'll find her. She already found Petra. Tell her I accept her offer. Whatever it is, I accept it. He hangs up. He looks at the book one last time. I'm going to need you to survive this. He could swear, in the way that 400-year-old obsessives sometimes could swear, that a page turned on its own in the still air of the farmhouse. Just one page. Just enough to show him a name he hadn't read yet. His name. Not in the index. Not at the head of his chapter. In the introduction. In the oldest hand. He stares at it for a long time. He sits back down. He is, it turns out, in the book himself. Not as a vampire. Not as someone who spared lives. As one of the spared. There is a note beside his name, in a hand he doesn't recognize. In a Latin he translates slowly, word by word, in the silence of the farmhouse with rain starting on the roof above him. The one who reads the record is also of the record. His mercy is itself a mercy's consequence. Remove him, and the book loses the only reader who would understand its purpose. He realizes someone's consequence. Some vampire somewhere in his own deep past, before his turning, in whatever life he lived before 1558. Let someone live. A grandparent. A great-grandparent. Someone in a chain he has never traced. And the consequence of that mercy was, eventually, him. And his mercy. And his restraint. And his 11,000. The mending doesn't know this yet either. He is also a convergence point. He closes the book, stands, and begins to pack. The rest of the story moves fast, the way stories move when all the long thinking is done and only the action remains. Here is what happens in the order it happens. Jules Beckers finishes the forgery in 41 hours. It is, he tells Petra when he presents it, the finest work of his career. Not because it is the most technically precise, though it is very precise, but because, in the process of copying the symbols and the ink patterns and the structure of a thing he does not understand, he has made something that feels, when he holds it, like something trying to be real. He does not know what to do with this feeling. He puts it in a box along with his invoice and does not examine it further. The forgery goes to Rook through a channel that Asha arranges. Asha, who turns out to have been working her own quiet project for 6 months, documenting the mending's plans, archiving their communications, building a case that she has been. She tells Mordecai, when they meet in Antwerp with a real book between them on a table, intending to bring to the Pale Accord, before she realized the Pale Accord was compromised. She gives Mordecai the documentation. He spends 2 hours reading it. When he looks up, there is something in his face that Petra, sitting across the room, has not seen there before. Not surprise, but its aftermath. The expression of a very old person encountering, for the first time in a very long time, a fact that costs them something. Sylvestra has been working with the mending for 12 years. She didn't tell them I had the book. She told them as part of a prepared plan. They were already positioned. The delivery of the book to you was engineered. The courier they used was theirs. They wanted you to find it, read it, feel its weight, understand what it meant, and then come to Sylvestra as you did, because you are the kind of person who goes to authority when he finds a problem. They expected you to hand it over. And when I didn't, they improvised. Rook's visit to your library was improvised. It was meant to be a handover, not a confrontation. A long silence. Why would Sylvestra? She has her own chapter. She hasn't read it. She refuses to read it. But she knows it exists, she knows it's long, she's been told how long, and she cannot stand the idea of a world shaped by her restraint that she has never consented to shape. It is a philosophical position that I understand better than I'd like. She would rather the world have never received the gift. She would rather not have given it without knowing. She didn't give it. She just didn't take what wasn't hers. That distinction is not always as clear as you think it is. This is, Petra notes, a reasonable point. Dr. Amara Osei receives a team of unturned protection that she is told, believably by Benedict's people, who are very good at this kind of cover story, is a WHO security detail in response to an unspecified threat to infectious disease researchers. She is irritated by the disruption to her schedule and completes her paper anyway, 3 days early out of spite. It is submitted to Nature 3 weeks before it was originally planned. The early submission, as it turns out, is what allows it to be peer-reviewed and published in time to influence a policy meeting in Geneva that would not have waited for the original date. The mending, following the forgery, sends cells to 3 cities based on its misdirections: Bratislava, Hamburg, Thessaloniki. They find nothing in any of them. They circle back. They try again. The forgery is, as Jules promised, very convincing. It takes them 11 days to become certain it isn't real. 11 days is enough. The real book reaches the Faroe Islands on the 8th day. It is placed in the monastery archive under the care of a woman named Sister Vigdis, who is 84 years old and who has been managing sensitive materials for 60 years, and whose response to the Liber Inmorsi is the most controlled and most genuine reaction Mordecai has ever witnessed. She holds it for a moment. She says, "Yes, I thought this existed." She puts it in the archive. She offers Mordecai coffee. On the 11th day, when the mending determines the forgery, Rook contacts Mordecai directly, not by phone. He appears alone at the door of the hotel in Antwerp where Mordecai is staying. Mordecai lets him in. They sit across from each other in a room with white walls and a view of the street, and they have the conversation that has been waiting to happen since the library in Prague. "You've moved it. We'll find it again. Perhaps. But you'll find it in a condition that makes what you want to do with it impossible." The archive in the Faroe Islands specializes in items that need to be managed rather than used. By the time you'd locate it, and it would take years, I promise you, the records inside it would be sealed under a protocol system that requires the cooperation of 12 independent parties to access. 12 parties who will not cooperate with the mending. The woman in Lisbon is alive. The paper she publishes in 3 weeks will change the global response framework for novel pathogens. The downstream consequences of that paper. Mordecai, I've seen the projections. When she publishes, the causal chains that branch from that single document will save lives. Will make the world more complex, more populated, more difficult to navigate. That is what mercy does, Rook. It makes the world more complicated, more full. Adds weight. And weight is not a flaw. Weight is what it means for something to matter. Rook is silent for a moment. "You read your own chapter." "I did. And you're in the introduction." Pause. "How do you know about the introduction?" "'Cause I'm in it too." Longer pause. "Which section?" "The same section as you." They look at each other. "Someone spared you too." "Before I was turned. Before all of this." Some night, 400 years ago, somewhere in what is now the Netherlands, a vampire walked past a 17-year-old boy who smelled of fear and bread and kept walking. And that boy grew up and had children, and those children had children, and eventually one of those children had a child who had a child who had a child who became. He stops. Who became the most effective recruiter the mending has ever had. Silence. "So you see the problem. Tell me what you see as the problem." The book records my existence as the consequence of an act of mercy. 11 causal generations downstream of a vampire walking past someone in the dark. You have me. The mending. This plan. The attempt to take the book and correct the omissions. If you follow the chain far enough forward, does the book do that? Does it project? It does not speculate forward from the present. Only records and analyses the past. Then we don't know. Don't know what? Whether my existence, what I have done, what I have built, what I have convinced those 240 vampires to believe. Whether that is also, somewhere in a chapter we haven't found yet, a contribution to a balance we can't see. Mordecai looks at him for a very long time. "That is, Rook, the most unsettling thing I have ever heard you say." "It is the most unsettling thing I have ever said." He stands. "I'm not going to stop. I want you to know that. Believe what I believe." Pauses. "The woman in Lisbon. The paper. Let her publish. Let that chain run. After that, we'll find another approach." He goes to the door. "Why?" 'Cause I read the convergence symbols. Not in the forgery. I know you took precautions, but there are other fragmentary sources, older ones. I read them. And Asha was right about what they mean. Harm the convergence points and the book goes silent. And if the book goes silent, he looks at Mordecai. We lose the only evidence that what we did with our restraint was ever real. He opens the door. I don't want to be the reason 400 years of mercy becomes unmeasurable, even if I think it was misguided. Even if I think it was. He doesn't finish the sentence. He leaves. Mordecai sits in the white room with the view of the street. Petra is in the doorway between the bedroom and the sitting room, having appeared silently sometime in the last 2 minutes, as she often does. Did he just? He just gave us 3 weeks. And after that, he'll find another strategy and we'll have to find another response. This is going to go on for a very long time, isn't it? Most important things do. She comes to stand beside him. They look at the street. Normal morning. Normal people. A man with a bicycle. A woman with a child on her hip. A student with headphones in, not quite awake, moving in the approximate direction of somewhere he needs to be. I have been walking through this world for 467 years. I have loved some of it and feared some of it and been indifferent to most of it, in the way that very old things become indifferent to most things simply because they have already seen so many versions of the same thing. I have sometimes thought my restraint was weakness. I have sometimes thought it was merely tactics. I have sometimes, on the best nights, the ones I have kept to myself because they seemed too fragile to say aloud, thought it was something I had no word for. Something that lived at the junction of choice and consequence and the long, compounding patience of time. The man with the bicycle locks it to a post and goes inside a cafe. The woman with the child looks up at the sky, checking for rain. The student turns his headphones up and crosses the street. There is a book made of skin and teeth that contains 11,000 names from my 4 centuries alone. Each name is a moment in the dark when I found, somewhere in the wreckage of whatever I am, a reason to keep walking. The book will sit in an archive on an island in a cold ocean for as long as it needs to. And the people in it will go on building and loving and discovering and making the world more complicated and more full. And I will go on walking through that world, through its cafes and its rainstorms and its Tuesday mornings. And I will find, as I have always found, that the reasons are never loud or obvious. They do not announce themselves. They are small. Smell of fear. A woman with a child on her hip, checking the sky for rain. He watches the woman look up. She puts her hand out to catch a raindrop. Male. Continues walking. The book calls this mercy. I call it something simpler. He watches her go. I call it paying attention. Fade to black. A close-up of a journal. The cover article byline. Dr. Amara Osei. WHO Department of Infectious Disease Preparedness. The camera pulls back. We are in a library. Not Mordecai's, but a public university library somewhere warm and bright. Students at tables. The particular productive hum of young people learning things. A girl, perhaps 19, is reading the Nature article on her laptop. She highlights a passage, opens a new document, begins to write. We do not know who she is. We do not know what she will become. The book, in its archive, does not know either. Not yet. It is waiting. It is very patient. Has always been very patient.